here we go, to review it later on if they were not able to join us, or if you still want to go back to it and get through some of the details at a slower pace. So let me introduce myself. I'm Peggy Poncelet, the CEPF Grant Director. I am going to coordinate the new investment of CEPF in the hotspot of Madagascar and the Indian Ocean Islands for the next 5 years. So many of you do not know me yet, but I look forward to meeting all of you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the objective of this meeting, it's about presenting very briefly the CEPF, but also presenting the new regional implementation team. Also to go through what is going to be the focus of this new investment of CEPF, which is based on, focusing on ecosystem-based adaptation. And then, of course, we are going to dive more into the eligibilities of this first call for proposal, eligibilities in terms of activities, in terms of geographies, but also in terms of organizations. And the main objective, obviously, is to answer some of your questions that we have from experience from the past, but also we have started receiving a few questions online via the email address, but also today we will answer your questions directly. So there will be two times where we will stop during the presentation to answer some questions. So if we have not covered everything yet, be sure to ask your question or to wait for the last session. In total, we will have about 45 minutes of presentation and 45 minutes for questions and answer. So this session is in English. Earlier this morning, we had a same session in French. The recordings of those two sessions will be on the website of the IUCN, which is here in this presentation, but also we will put the link in the chat. And you will find that link as well in the call for proposal. This particular session is for both large and small grants. We will cover both aspects. And I would like to ask all of you, please, to rename yourself and your organization. So you can click on your picture. On top right, you will have 3 dots. If you click on that, you will get more options, and one of them is the options to rename yourself. So if you could please put your name and your organization like I did for myself, that would be great. So we know who we are exchanging with. Also, quick reminder, the key documents are all available in the CEPF call for letter of inquiry. You have different links at the end of this page, so please go check the call itself and read through it carefully. And yeah, you can also go, as we go through the presentation, you can also please put your questions in the chat. The team will answer some of you directly, and if not, we will then do it verbally as well during the presentation. So very briefly, I will present CEPF because many of you already know us since we've been around for 20 years, 22 years even. So the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund is a partnership of the 6 donors that you can see on this screen. And the objective was is to support civil society in developing countries, but also in countries with economies in transition, to protect the world's biodiversity hotspots, which are, as many of you already know, the regions with the most well, most biologically rich environment, but also that are the most threatened, have the most threatened terrestrial ecosystems. And we're starting we are working in 25 of those 36 hotspots in the world. In this map, you can see in red, this is where we are currently investing, although some of those regions are currently closing in terms of investment. And we may go back to them later on. Some of them we have already invested and no longer invest, and some of them, like the dark blue ones, we will not invest because CEPF are not going to work. Sorry. So the CEPF will not invest in these hotspots that are in dark blue because of the fact that they are in developed countries. So far, we've invested $277 million US. And this has led to impact, which I'm not gonna go through the details, but I just want you to understand how CEPF is measuring its impact. These are divided into 4 pillars, which are biodiversity conservation, capacity building, human well-being, and enabling conditions. And within those 4 pillars, we are looking at 16 indicators. Some of the impacts that I'm going to share with you just now, just to give you a few highlights, and which are based on what you, so civil society organization in the different hotspots, have been doing, and we aggregate this at global level for us to measure our impact. So, for example, we've worked with 1,000. Thank you. We've worked with 1,027 globally threatened species to avoid their extinctions. We've also tried to improve the management. Well, we have improved the management of more than 51 million hectares of key biodiversity areas, which are the most threatened sites for species and their habitat. Most important sites, and also threatened for the species and the habitat. We've also supported networks and partnerships, 705 networks at global level, to strengthen them, because together, when you work together, we notice the impact can be greater and sustainability is longer. And this has also benefited 4,000, almost like 5,000 communities throughout the world, which represent more than 1 million people. So you see, this is quite a broad overview of what CEPF through civil society organization can achieve, and we are hoping to achieve a great impact in this hotspot of Madagascar and the Indian Ocean Islands. So we can go to the next one. I'm sorry. Sorry. So to know more about CEPF, please go to the website at cepf.net. But also, if you want to know more about the impact of CEPF, I put you the link here for the impact report, the latest one. And in that report, not only you will see the impact, but you can see we've tried to present a few of the key projects that contributed the most, or in interesting ways, innovative ways, to those indicators. So that gives you good ideas of projects that CEPF supports. You may have noticed, this is maybe less relevant for you in English speakers, but you may have noticed that we made a lot of references to our website in the call for proposal. But if at any stage you need to switch to French or Malagasy, on the website you will see this icon on the top right, which is translate. And then when you click on that, you will be offered the possibility to change the language. And so that's a Google translation of the website, but it's working pretty well nowadays. So you have French and Malagasy as an option. So now in the Madagascar and the Indian Ocean Island biodiversity hotspot, I just want to highlight two things. First, we will often refer to it as MADIO. This is the acronym for Madagascar and Indian Ocean Island Biodiversity Hotspot, so MADIO. And within this hotspot, where you have the map on the right, we're going to go later on through more details on what is eligible in terms of geography. But I want to highlight the fact that Mayotte and Réunion Island are not eligible to CEPF funding and will not be, because they actually belong to, well, they have the French territories, being developed countries. So this is what I wanted to highlight on this particular slide. And then I want now to go back a little bit in terms of our investment in this hotspot. So since the beginning of CEPF, which was like since 2001, so we have been investing almost $18 million in the hotspot. The first investment with 4.2 million was exclusively focused on Madagascar island, the Madagascar, sorry. And then we had a small consolidation phase of 1.4 million, also on Madagascar, with a fewer number of grants. And then probably most of you will know about the most recent investment, which was 12.3 million just ended now a few months ago, and then was for Madagascar, but also the other 3 countries, Comoros, Seychelles, and Mauritius. We now have, thanks to the...
Doesn't it, like, from what you have shown, doesn't it, like, the 16 million you have shown, it doesn't add up?
I was going to go through this one. So the new investment is with it's with fundings from the Green Climate Fund. It's going to allow us to invest more or less $8 million in Madagascar, plus 2.7 million in the Comoros, in Mauritius, and Seychelles, respectively, for the next 5 years. So from 2022 to 2027. So
yeah, so unless I'm wrong, it seems like those numbers doesn't add up.
So this means the $16 million that we are now going to invest in Madagascar will be in addition to this almost 18 million that we have already invested. So the blue table is what we have invested in the past. The red table is what we are now going to invest. Is that clear now?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And so the Green Climate Fund project that we are now going to implement, or investment we are now going to implement, will be focusing on a new niche, which is different than what CEPF has done in the past, in the sense that we are now going to support ecosystem-based adaptation, so EBA. So those actions that will restore and help better manage key biodiversity areas, but those key biodiversity areas that are providing ecosystem services, important for the communities, the species, and the ecosystem to adapt, to be more resilient to climate change. And so this is a shift, and I really want to focus and to emphasize this point. This is a shift for CEPF in the sense that it's a bigger investment, 16 million for 5 years, but really also a shift in terms of the topics. We are really looking into ecosystem-based adaptations for the projects we're now going to fund. I'm going to now give the floor to Eva, who is our team leader for the new regional implementation team. Eva?
Yes, so thank you, Peggy, and thank you again, everyone, for attending this session today. So this new investment of CEPF for the next 5 years, starting from 2022 to 2027, is managed by a regional implementation team that we called RIT or RIT, which is coordinated by IUCN NL and CEPF GKM. So this consortium is composed by 5 organizations. IUCN Netherlands, which works in conservation of endangered species. CEPF GKM, which is based in Madagascar and is a national NGO working in the field of environment, climate change, and community development. Initiative development from Comoros, which has also a branch in Madagascar and in Comoros that supports capacity building of local CSOs. And FORENA, Fondation Ressources et Nature, working mainly in the field of sustainable development and nature protection, restoration, tree planting. And then the last organization is SEICAT, or Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, which is also a climate adaptation fund working in sustainable development linked directly to marine conservation.
So we want to present you ecosystem-based adaptation because that will be really the focus point of this investment. So what we mean by ecosystem-based adaptation, it is all activity who will restore or manage or conserve ecosystem service to help the people to fight against climate change and give them more sustainable living. So a lot of information can be found on different websites, and you can also directly reach us. And the project and the proposal project should be target this different goal to reduce the vulnerability of a population for adaptation of the climate change.
Sorry, it's me. So I want now to go through some key recommendations, and I'm saying key in the sense that they are based on our previous experience in other hotspots, but also in our previous investment in the Madagascar and the Indian Ocean biodiversity hotspot. So the first point is for you to please read the details of the call for proposal. And I'm saying that because in the past investment, the latest investment in Madagascar, in the Indian Ocean island hotspot, we had a success rate of 9.3%, meaning that for 100 LOI, so letters of inquiry, we have received only 9.3 of them were selected to move forward. And it's not because the projects were not good or because they were not written properly, it's mainly because they were actually not eligible in the first place. So please assess your eligibility, go in details in the call to fully understand whether or not your project's areas is eligible and your project theme or activities are eligible. And then also make use of the RIT, the RIT is available for you in your countries to chat with you and assess your eligibility. Also remember, we will have more calls. There will be calls even early next year. And these other calls will open new geographies, but will also open new thematic. So please be patient if this call is not completely focused on your interest. Don't try to fit it in because we will probably end up not selecting it, and this means you will lose your time instead of taking the time to really assess right now whether or not it fits, and if it doesn't fit, to wait for the next call. I also want to highlight the fact that it's important for you to respect the format. Especially this is true for the small grants, for which you are required to submit a LOI, so the letter of inquiry, in Word format, using the template provided in the call, and also a budget in Excel format. The template is also provided in the call. Please do not send PDF. Don't overestimate your budget. Again, this is based on our past investment in the hotspot lessons learned. There have been a lot of amendments in order to provide grantees with more time to implement their project, because they were unable to spend their budget within the initial time frame of their project. They had overestimated it. And that has an impact, because at the end of our investment, when we, CEPF, has no more time to give you, we ended up getting a lot of funds back to CEPF because grantees were unable to spend it. So please make sure you assess really your needs and not apply for the maximum limit just because you can. And then if your project is great, if it's going on well, nothing prevents us from doing an amendment, but to give you more time and more funds. So to do it the other way around, I think it's the best approach. Also, we would strongly recommend you to consult stakeholders where you want to implement your project on the main themes or topics of your project, and maybe to propose regional projects to us. And by that, it's also an important focus for this investment, since you've seen it's a bigger amount. We are looking at topics that can be more widespread, like climate change. So regional project within the hotspot or with outside expertise are interesting for us within this call or within this investment. And then last but not least, please, in your letters of inquiry, be clear on the expected results or impact of your project, and also how you will measure them. Quantify those impacts and give details on how you measure them. And this is important because when we will assess your project, we will actually assess your project based on their potential contribution towards CEPF logical framework.
So yes, thank you for explaining all that, but it seems like...
Can I ask you to just maybe put your question in the chat, or maybe wait for the question session? There is one coming up just now. So it allows me to finish the presentation and maybe answer some of your questions. And if not, I'd be happy to answer your question during the question session that is coming up just now. Thank you. Excuse me. So I just was saying that if you can please check the ecosystem profile on page 234, you will have chapter 15, which is the logical framework. This is where CEPF is presenting its targets for this current investment. And you will have, you can show the next slide, Paul, please. So you will see, thank you. You will see that we have targets with different outcomes. So if you can check through this and describe in your letter of inquiry how your project will contribute to some of those targets and by how much it will contribute, and by how much I mean numbers of people, numbers of hectares, for example, that will then help make a strong case for your project, for it to be selected. So now we have a session for questions. So I'm opening the floor, and Marc will facilitate this discussion. Yeah, and we have another section after that covering more the eligibility aspect. So I just want to give you a heads up.
Just to explain to everyone, because I'm reading, of course, the chat, and I see already some complaints coming up that you have no space to ask questions. This presentation is made up basically 45 minutes. So this is a short break, and then we have another section, and then another short break, and then we have 45 minutes for all your questions and answers. Meanwhile, we appreciate if you put all your questions in the chat, because the chat will be saved, and then we'll put your questions with our answers on our website so that everybody can see what were the questions and what were the answers from the CEPF, so that everyone has equal information. Let me take 3 questions for this point in time, for this break. And maybe, Era, I think you are very persistent, so I'll give you the floor because you shout. Please, Era.
I didn't know that I had shout out. I didn't mean to. I'm just asking. What I've read on the chart is that the investment is for 5 years, but from what I have seen, the grant is for just 3 years. So why that does happen? So you've got 5 years investment in the Indian Ocean islands, but if we are to apply for a grant, we're gonna get just 3 years. Why is that? Why your investment is limited by the application?
Please,
so it's
Peggy.
5 years investment starting in July 2022, going to June 2027. But obviously we need to get the process started. So we needed to recruit the RIT, we needed to train the RIT, we needed to agree on issuing the call. Now we have to disseminate the calls, we have to answer all your questions, then we're getting the LOI, so the letters of inquiry, then we have to do the selection process. So
what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that at the end of our 3 years investment, you are willing to invest for 2 years more?
No,
if we have met all your
So that's what I want to say. It takes about 1 year to do the selection of the first projects. While we will be selecting those first projects, we will launch the selection of other projects in parallel.
No,
but we want all the projects to
taking
end
into
in
account
December
that you have selected my
2026,
project,
so that we can actually have 6 months to do the wrap-up. And when we do the wrap-up, we will end up being in June 2027. So overall, the maximum project duration will be 3.5 years. However, we may have other fundings to continue for another phase of investment afterwards. But
what funding would we have? Can you tell me?
So, sorry, maybe if I can intervene, Peggy. So, Era, please. So the total amount of money is available for a 5-year time span. As Peggy explained, we've got a startup phase in which basically you cannot use the money. And we've got a wrap-up phase in basically no one also can either use the money anymore because we've got a wrap-up. So that effectively leaves implementation or working time for that money is roughly 3.5 years.
That makes so much sense, thank you. But then,
and then as Peggy explained, there may be access to other funding, but what we know for now for sure is that this is the amount we have. Within this time span, we've got to let this money do its work.
Fine. Yes, I would have never questioned that. Yes, thank you. But your pre-talk person said that maybe after that there will be other grants sponsoring the thing. I want to know, what would there be the other grants? You just said that there will be other opportunities, let's say it this way.
Peggy, do you want to explain this or?
Yes, so during those 5 years, we will have different calls for proposal. So this current call is one opportunity, but you will have other opportunities during the, let's say not 5 years, but during the next 3 to 4 years, you will have other calls, so other opportunities.
Calls from CPF or other
From
companies?
CEPF, yes, we have 16 million to award. We are certainly
Yeah, I
not
know how
going to
much you've
award
got, but like from what
16
I know,
million
like
in the
I
first
had
half.
only one last time, and this is the second one now for Indian Ocean. So
So maybe
since
I need to
having you,
clarify that.
I have had the other one
Era,
being called.
let
Within
me
the time I
clarify.
still had the grant.
Let me clarify something, because I think you got confused since the beginning of the presentation. So CEPF has several investment phases. We
Yes.
had already 3 in the past, which was the blue table. Maybe Paul, you can show that slide. The blue table where we had 3 investment phases. Thank you, Paul. So we had the first phase that was 5 years, from 2001 to 2005. We had another phase, which was 2 years only. And then we had the previous phase, the one that just closed, which was from 2015 to 2022. Those are phases, investment phases. But within those phases, we have different calls for proposal. We are now in the red table. We are now in that new phase from 2022 to 2027, so 5 years. We will have more than one call. This is the first call. This information session is about this call, and we will have more calls coming up during those 5 years.
That sounds really good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
you have answered my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Era. Maybe one more question. Any other questions for now? Who wants to put a question? And then we'll continue with the information session after the 6th.
Hi everyone.
Christian, please.
This is Christian speaking from Rogers Group. Well, I've put my question in the chat. I work for a company called Rogers, and we have 2,500 hectares of land in the south of Mauritius, which is annexed to the national parks. And while going through the documentation and the interactive map, we have observed that our land doesn't form part of the key biodiversity area. However, we are part of the UNESCO Marine Biosphere, and we have some rare plants on our land, and we're planning to do some projects, namely an agroforestry project, which is a nature-based solutions project for climate resilience, and also for mitigation of emissions in this region. And also, we have already started the rehabilitation of river reserves, and we are doing this as a private initiative. And I was just wondering, is it possible for us to apply for for a grant if we have projects outside of the KBAs that have been earmarked? Knowing that we are in the UNESCO Marine Biosphere of Mauritius, the only, for now, UNESCO Marine Biosphere of Mauritius. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Peggy?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for what you're doing. This is not common to hear that. So thank you. It's a great initiative and great to have this like more stakeholders on board. For that specific area, I'm sorry, I won't be able to give you the answer, but can I please ask you to get in touch with the Forena, who will be able to answer you more in terms of the geographies, in terms of the eligibility of that specific geography?
Yes, sorry, but please direct all your questions. So Christian, please direct your question to the general email that we have set up for these questions and answers, and then we will answer that accordingly. I think your questions has 2 sub-questions in it. Is AD location, is the location eligible?
Yes.
And secondly, are you eligible as a company?
And that's
exactly
why I was going to say, yes, as a company, you are eligible.
Thanks a lot. Looking forward. I'll send the question via email.
Please do. And
Thank you.
of course, in the rest of the presentation, we will also have some more time to look at specifically at the location, the geographic locations. Thank you. I think we can continue now with the second part of this information session. Please, Eva.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So we will now move on to the details of the course, the eligible activities, as well as the priority areas of investment and the other eligibility criteria. Next slide, please. So for the large grants, we have launched the call on November 15th. Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, and Seychelles are the eligible country. The closing date is on 23rd of December 2022. The investment priorities will be 1.1 that we will explain more later, and 1.2 just for Comoros and Seychelles. For the grant size, it will be greater than 50,000. And the duration of the project, as Vicky already explained, is about 3 years and a half. Next slide, please. So for small grants, we also launched the call on November 15th. And also eligible countries are the 4 countries in the biodiversity hotspot of the Indian Ocean. But the closing date will be on February 2nd of 2023. There are 3 investment priorities, 1.1 for all countries, 1.2 for only Seychelles, and 3.1 for Madagascar. So the size of the grants will be under 50,000, and also the project duration will be around 3 years and a half. Next slide, please. So for the activities and thematics, we are going to focus on 2 kinds of strategic direction or orientation in terms of thematics. The first one is about empowering communities and civil society in implementing activities focused on EBA, so ecosystem-based adaptations action. And the second one is about strengthening the capacity of local communities and again civil society so that they can get resilience and enhance their adaptive capacity to climate change. Next slide, please. So for this first strategic direction, we have 2 components. 1.1 or investment priority 1.1 is about all activities which focused on ecosystem-based adaptation. We can give some example. Activities may be some climate smart agriculture actions, sustainable management of terrestrial or marine ecosystem, watershed management, forest restoration, eradication of invasive species, or maybe also capacity building in participatory ecological monitoring and so on. So you can find more details in the course. And for the second component, 1.2, it is more about economical activities which support the which will be implemented around this priority ecosystem and which will allow to increase the resilience of community, the surrounding communities, which will support the economic values chain, and which will also contribute to the preservation of ecosystem services. So if we summarize, IP 1.1 is for large grants and small grants both, and will be eligible for the 4 countries. 1.2 is for large grants for Comoros and Seychelles, and small grants only for Seychelles. So you can find more details on the ecosystem profile on chapter 14. Next slide, please. And for the second strategic direction, we will focus on the strengthening the capacity of local communities, so and local CSOs. So it will be more activities in capacity building and maybe on project preparation, fundraising, programming, and budget management, as well as programming or human resources management, organizational governance. So we aim to strengthen small organization to be able to manage funds like CEPF. So it will be eligible only for Madagascar and only for small grants. Next slide, please.
So for resumes, you have the key biodiversity area selection as priority by CEPF, where the investment of the strategic direction 1 need to be on. So for strategic investment priority 1.1, that will be the 10 TBA of Comoros, 30 of Madagascar, 10 of Mauritius, and 11 of Seychelles. And for investment priority 1.2, that will be the 10 of Comoros and the 11 of Seychelles for large grant and the 11 of Seychelles for the small grant. So on the chapter 14 of the ecosystem profile, you can find all of the information. Interactive map can be also found in the IUCN Netherlands website. I will present you. So this interactive map will show you the key BA eligible for this first call in green. So you can move and so if your area are eligible. You can find also 9 other key BA prioritized but not eligible for this fourth call. They are placed in Seychelles, and you can find also the other KBA non-prioritized for CEPF investment. Eva?
So yes, for our timeline, so for the large grant process, it will take us approximately 7 months. We have opened the call on November till December. So we will review all the LOA on February and March 2023. We will notify the shortlist of potential grantees on mid-March 2023. And we will ask them to give us to elaborate the full proposal on March and June. So we will finish contracting with the final shortlist of grantees of CEPF on June 2023. And for the small grants, the process will take approximately 5 or 6 months. And also we open the call on November. The call will be closed on February or 2023. We will review all the LOIs on March 2023 and February. We will notify the final shortlist on mid-March, and we will end contracting on May 2023. Next slide, please.
I just want to say that it's like, actually, you haven't said what we're supposed to do. You haven't said what we're supposed to write in the application to get the grant. Nothing at all like that. You just said that the grant is there at this time and at this time, and this is what it's doing in Madagascar and so on and so on. But no one have answered the question in terms of like what we're supposed to write and what the CPF is sponsoring these days.
Era, I think that all the details on your question is already on the call. We have also attached some links that.
So what was this meeting for?
Era, excuse me, but I think you came to this call with a bit of expectations that we may not be able to meet right now, but if you want us to have a side conversation, you can contact me by email. I'll be happy to schedule a call and we can go through that, you and I.
So
yeah, I mean, I
will
thought
put my
this
email
whole meeting
address.
is being done to guide us, to help us to
Yep,
apply
which is
for
what
the
I'm
grant.
going to be.
But like from what I have
That's what
seen,
I'm
there's
going
no.
to be happy to do. Era, I will
Okay,
send.
why
I
would you
will
do
put
it
my
privately?
email
Why
address.
are we not openly talking about like what you're supposed to do to apply for this grant and get the grant?
maybe
You're
Era,
not telling me what you're sponsoring. You're telling me about what has happened before and
no,
what's the second
Era,
phase
sorry,
about.
Era,
But like,
Era, sorry, I have to cut you short on this. Please understand that all the information, what you need to do, what you need to write is available on the website. And we're explaining where you can find it on the websites. What are the
totally
deadlines?
understand. Thank you. But what was this meeting for?
This meeting is for additional questions that have not been answered by the information provided in the call through our websites, the various
Seriously.
websites. Yeah.
So Era, I have put
No,
my
you're
email
not
address
trying to
in the.
explain to me like you're not trying to
Era,
explain like
Era,
what I
I'm
can
sorry.
apply for and
Era,
how we can get the
please.
grant. You're
Please,
not
Era,
explaining
you're
that
not
to
the
me.
only one on this call. You have to respect everyone else on this call as well.
Is
So
anyone
as I
else
said,
trying to ask
I
the
will be
questions?
happy to answer any of your questions. You have my email address. Please contact me. We will schedule a call with you. We can discuss and I can answer all your questions. But I think in terms of this presentation, we are presenting what is eligible in terms of geographies. We are presenting what is eligible in terms of thematic. Surely we're not going to write the project proposal for any of you, but we are also telling you we are available to answer any more specific questions you may have. But this is a call for everybody. So of course we cannot be specific for everybody right now, but we have an open channel for communication. So please feel free to contact.
Thank you, and I apologize.
Thank you. Eva, you can continue.
Thank you, Becky. So we are moving on to the other eligibility criteria. So for you to know if your organization is eligible for CEPF funding, so we will fund NGOs, community groups, university, and private company. And also this organization must be authorized to receive charitable contribution. We can also give funding for organization, government-owned organization, which has an independent legal status. Also, applicant based outside of the hotspot biodiversity can also apply for CEPF if the actions are focused on the 4 biodiversity hotspot in the Indian Ocean. And also we will be a joint project with other organization, including a main organization as a lead is also eligible for CEPF funding. Next slide, please. There are a list of ineligible activities that we have put on the call. So there will be a full list of these activities. So we won't go through all of the activities. We have just some example that we can give you. There may be a purchase of firearms or use of pesticide or harmful substances is not eligible. The purchase of land, displacement of or relocation of population, any activities that may have negative impacts on ecosystem and communities are also not eligible for CEPF funding. Next slide, please. Okay.
We can.
So you have yes.
Yes, we can take 3 questions at this point in time.
Yeah, we had one question in the chat by Fabiola Monti. If the focus of EBA, which after all is about helping people to adapt and using FABA CBD definition, it is a bit of a missed opportunity if the project implementation is focused on KBA. So the question is more for Peggy, why CEPF chose to focus on KBA and not implementing ABA everywhere?
Okay, thank you. I hope that some of the questions will be more targeted into what is eligible for this course, since this is the session. But in terms of the strategy of CEPF, it has been developed based on an ecosystem profile, which is the document we are constantly referring you to. This process has been an updated process based on the first ecosystem profile we had. It's a consultative process, and it's integrating the aspect of key ecosystems that will be the most important for populations and species to be resilient to climate change, which is why we're having specific investment priorities and geographies. This process has been done on a consultative basis, so stakeholders from the different countries have been consulted, and we are now, me and the RIT, in charge of implementing this strategy. We are not in charge of redoing the strategy. That's why I would be happy if we can keep this type of questions for discussions by email. But for now, I'm happy to answer more questions related to the call.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Then just adding to this, and then we'll go to Nancy, and then after that to Bernardo. But for the last speaker, please realize that basically the sort of the historic origin of the CEPF is critical ecosystems, and that's clear. Currently, of course, we are in 2 types of crises globally. One is still the biodiversity crisis, which is not improving to a great extent, so that still needs a lot of funding and a lot of effort to solve that one. But this is, of course, now combined with the climate change impacts. So basically, this course tries to see how you can basically adapt to climate change or the negative impacts of climate change on the one hand. On the second hand, also protect your natural heritage. So basically, that's the play we're in, and that you will also be in. So that's the challenge that we have to meet. Please, Nancy, a question for you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you very much also to Peggy for a session that I'm sitting with another colleague. We're finding it really informative. My question is, you've just shown a slide on activities that are not eligible. And one of those was, it showed harmful substances, and I think you mentioned poison. But you've also mentioned that one of the priorities is invasive alien species action. So, which is very likely to include poisoning.
Yes, so, exactly.
Could you maybe comment on that, please?
Yeah. So this morning with the French session, I spontaneously came back onto this point. So thank you for bringing it. Yes. So CEPF fundings in general cannot be used to purchase or use nocive or chemical substance. However, we know that for invasive alien species, we may need to use some of those. And so we have some specific safeguards. So we will then work on elaborating a plan in order to be as less negatively impactful on the environment, but still targeting the species, the invasive species. So we can, on a case-by-case, use chemicals, and CEPF can fund that, but there will be separate safeguards. So for now, don't worry too much about that. Just work on your LOI. And if your project is selected based on the general approach of it, we will then work together on this safeguard.
Okay, on risk mitigation. Okay, fantastic.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Bernardo, please.
Hello, and thank you. I have 2 quick questions, and pretty much it should be written in some of the documents. But before I start to read all the documents, I want to make sure that we are based in Mauritius, and I want to make sure that coastal ecosystems like mangrove, seagrass, and reef are part of the ecosystems that can receive grants. So this is the first question.
That's yes.
Good, easy one. Now the second one is these projects, and without reading still all the documentation, I do understand they have a conservative conservation element. Does activities related with education and generating awareness and bringing society to be more active through the education could be also part of the eligible elements?
Definitely. I think, of course, what we aim for is long-term impact for both, at the cutting edge of conservation, development, and climate change adaptation. So if you propose something that will enhance sort of a better understanding of how sort of economy relates to ecology, relates to climate change, then of course that will help maintain our long-term impact.
Good, very clear. Thank you very much.
I just want to make sure we are clear on this. The main, this call is specifically mainly under Strategic Direction 1, mainly for field-based activities in which are, ecosystem-based adaptation activities. So the main focus of your project is going to be more about awareness raising, this may fall under another call when we will target more the other strategic directions. So it doesn't mean that you cannot have a little bit of that within a project of more field-based activities, conservation on the ground in terms of management, restoration, and things like that. But if it's the main focus of your project, then I would advise you to wait for a subsequent call that will be focusing more on that type of projects.
Okay, that's important information. And just, do you have more or less an idea when that second call will come?
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, so we will have another call next year, somewhere probably around March, April, that will be issued then. I need to discuss that with the team, obviously. And so that some of these some of these strategic direction we are not covering yet will be eligible then. So.
Great. Appreciate
it. Thank you. There's one question I see in the chat, and then we'll continue with the session. Is from sorry, I forgot your name, Xavier. Whether one should require clearance from authorities when you want to work a project. Of course, whenever you're proposing a project, you should make sure that you have the collaboration and the cooperation of any entity that is charged with the management of that space. Thank you for now. We'll continue. There will be space for more questions afterwards. Please, Eva.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So how to submit your proposal? For large grants, you have to submit it online on Conservation Grants portal. So maybe Peggy can show us how to navigate through conservation grants later. And for small grants, you have to send it by email. So you should email cepf.rythmadieu2@safjkm.org. The submission deadlines, we have already recessed that. So December 23 for large grants and February 2 for small grants. Next slide, please. So here are some elements of response of some frequently asked questions. So firstly, there is no co-funding required for large grants. And also there is no limit of the number of the project that we are going to fund for this first call. So we will base our decision on the quality of the proposal and also on the budget that is available. And also for the administrative aspects, eligible administrative cost is 13% for large grants and 10% for small grants. And for activities that are implemented in areas that is already managed by one organization, you should provide us an approval letter for the project. And it is habitually the case of the protected areas, for example. Next slide, please.
Peggy, you want to show your
Yes.
conservation?
Yes, sorry. Here, coming here. I'm not seeing. Okay, not this one. Okay, so can you all see my screen on the conservation grants?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm only gonna just to make it clear, the email address here on top is not the one you're gonna use. I'm only using a training environment, so I won't have everything exactly what you will have, but I at least want to give you a bit of an impression of what it could be looking like when you will use the link we provided in the call for conservation grants. So what I'm showing now is only for large grants. The small grants are not using this system. The large grants will then come here. You will, if you already have an account, you can already log in straight away. If you don't have an account, you can either click on new user or click here to create an account. I also want to flag the fact that you have different languages that you can use. English, Spanish, French is one of them, and you also have Brazilian, Portuguese from Brazil, but it's Portuguese anyway. So I'll keep for this one, and give me a second to log in. So once you have created your account, of course, you will be coming back to this page and then log in. It's a little bit of a slow system. It has to load. But I want to already flag to you that you have this here on top right, help documents. So if you go there and you select all and you click go, you will have the manual for how to use conservation grant, and you have it in different languages. This is in English and you have it here in French. If you go back to your dashboard, which is where you landed in the first place, you will see that you have different options in terms of moving forward. But normally, if you use our link, the one that is in the call, you should land directly into the call for proposal for Madagascar and the Indian Ocean island. If not, if by any reason you're not landing there, you can find it here. You go under open calls for proposal, and you will find it here listed. My list is different because it's a training environment, but you will have one that it will be called MADIO, LG for large grants. So you will see it. So you will then click on it. I'm just going to show you another example, but you will click on it. You're going to have some descriptions showing to make sure you are in the right call for proposal. So if you are, then you can click here on create an application. The one here at the bottom. Wait, so I already have one ongoing, so sorry about that. But that was just to show you how to do. Now, you are now entered into an LOI, a letter of inquiry. This is where you find all the information you're going to need to fill in as an applicant for large grants. Again, it's large grants. So you have a few instructions, then you click save and next, and then you will see you will be sent to the next tab, which is collaborators, and this is where you can invite more colleagues of yours so they can work. So this is for me, I'm just here, but then you can have invite new colleagues of yours so then they can together start working on your applications. If you have any problem going through this process, so technical problem, I mean, you can also contact the conservation grant team, which is the IT team, that can maybe solve any of your problem, if it's maybe a problem of brothers or things like that. But so those are all the information you will be required to fill in. Someone has asked me for a template so that you can start working offline and then fill in everything online afterwards. I'm going to send that in the chat, but please be not confused. The template I'm going to send now in the chat are for large grants, and it's only to help you out filling these forms online. We will not accept any large grant application by email. It's only with this system, this platform. So it's really only to help you, guide you, and do not get confused with the template for small grants, which are a Word document and an Excel document that you have to send by email. So it's two different processes, so please do not be confused with that. But yeah, so this is to show you how it looks like. And then one more point on this, you don't have to fill in everything in one go and submit. You can fill in, as long as you always click at the bottom of the page, save and next, it will be saved. And then you can come back at a later stage by going to your grantee dashboard. So by just logging in, you will land on this page and you will find your application here. Do you see now I have two? And if you click on this edit here, it's reopening it and you can then continue working on it. And when you're done, don't forget, obviously, to click here on the right. When you're done, finished with it, to click submit and go through the few steps until you receive an email acknowledging the good submission of your proposal. So I'm sending now on the chat to everybody the LOI template for large grants, but again, do not get confused with the small grant template. And it's only to guide you to fill in things online. Any other question?
Questions, please. So while you think of questions, please note this email address, which is given, to which you can send all your questions, and then we'll try to put them on the website in a public question and answer format, so that everybody can see the questions asked and the answers given, so that everyone has sort of the same amount of information available. Eva, do you want to add anything?
One question.
Michelle, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. How many projects can be approved per cycle?
So you can apply to as many grants as you want, and even if you, in the future, if you're successful now and we have another call later on, you can still apply for another grant. So you can apply for small, large grants as many times as you want, and you can actually be selected more than once for a grant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Xavier, please.
I do have an issue in sending the template in this chat. I'm not quite sure. So I'm going to send it to Paul by email. Hopefully he can put it in the chat quickly. And if not, we will make it available on the website as well, on the IUCN website with the Q&A sessions. And sorry about that.
Okay, I see two hands, one from Xavier and then Nancy. Xavier, please. Shoot.
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, everybody, and thank you for the presentation and answering the questions. I had a question regarding reforestation or afforestation or agroforestry projects, which which I understand from the legislation in Mauritius. I'm in Mauritius actually, and it's for the area of Ferney, which is in the southeast in the Bamboo Mountain Range, that we must have authorization from the Forestry Service and perhaps other authorities, for which there will be a bit of a process that might take some time. My question was in relation with this time frame, that if we apply for the grant and perhaps simultaneously we apply with the authority to get clearance, how do these two processes work together? This is my question. I'm not sure if it's clear.
Maybe I can try, Peggy. So my suggestion would be, so your intention is that you want to work in that area and that you need permission. So from that perspective,
the land ownership is not an issue, because there are collaborations and there are good relationships and willingness to do projects in the area. It's mostly about clearance from authorities.
No, that's clear. But I mean, if your intention is that one point in time you want to work in that space and you need the permission of that authority, and you're not sure whether you're going to get the grant or not, to be on the safe side, I would start the process assuming that you will get the grant. Because otherwise you get the grant and you don't have the permission and basically you're stuck.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
I also want to clarify and point on this, not necessarily to your specific example, but for the wider audience. We usually would like to have project proposal with the letter of support from the relevant authorities, obviously, but we also understand that this is just the LOI, so the letter of inquiry stage. Especially for large grants, there will be if your project is shortlisted, there will be a full proposal stage where you're going to have more time to work on that and obtain those letter of support. However, if you do not have those letter of support, we won't be able to give you the grant, basically. So we can shortlist you, work with you, see if you can get this letter of support, and then if you do, then we can provide you with the grant. In some cases, and this is going to be on a case-by-case basis, if you do not have those necessary letter of support, we may still be able to grant, to provide you a grant. But that's more when, you know, the case of like conflict with some approaches or some authorities, we can still work things around it. But again, that's more on a case-by-case basis. And it's more the exception than the rule, to be.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nancy, I think you have a question about the large grant sort of assessment time frame. Is that correct?
Yes, Mark, thank you. That's one of my questions. I can start with that. It just looks to me the time frame that you've shown, which is from March to June, development of full proposals. Thank you. And then contracting in June, it doesn't seem to leave a window for any substantial review process of those full proposals. So I'm just wondering how realistic that is in terms of contracting in June next year.
Yeah, maybe Becky, you go.
Yeah, it's a short time frame. I'm not hiding this from you, but it's also because we would really like the project to start in July, the latest. I'm talking for the large grants, right? So it's going to be quite of a fast pace, sorry for that. What is not maybe captured here is we will have, for the shortlisted project, we will have a session on how to best fill in your full proposal. We will explain what we expect in each section of the full proposal. So again, this is not for the LOI, right? This is when we have shortlisted you. We are then going to organize a session for those shortlisted projects and show you what goes where. Hopefully, you will have then the time to go back and forth with the stakeholders, including some authorities that we just mentioned, in order to fill in your proposal on time and then we can go back and forth with the different iteration of your full proposal. But
Okay.
it's a short timing, we agree.
Yes, okay, noted. It is
It's
ambitious.
because, you know, it goes with the comment we just heard before in terms of the time frame. That 3.5 years is actually short, shorter than what we want. But if we take too much time for the full proposal, it's going to be even shorter, because obviously we have a deadline for our investment. So that's why we're going to try to keep it as short as possible.
Okay, understood. So we'll be looking to start projects in July next year.
But of course, you know, if we don't have all the answers for a specific project we are interested in, if we don't have all the answers by June, it's okay. We can continue working with you past that deadline. But this means your project will have to be potentially shortened if your initial scope was for 3.5 years.
Right. Okay, understood. Thank you for that. And my second question is about partnerships and whether projects with partnerships are likely to be favoured in the selection process, or if it won't make very much difference.
Favoured, I'd say. I mean, as we all know, that basically the forces against us, conservationists, are massive. So joining forces, seeking synergy, proactively seeking synergy with other actors would make a lot of sense in certain cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we go for maximum impact after sort of the funding is gone, or this part of the funding is gone. So yes, be smart, I'd say, be smart.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mark.
We want impact.
Yeah.
And you will see we have specific sections on stakeholder engagement. If we realize you're listing several stakeholders, or if we know of other actors active in the same region or on the same theme, that seems to be really key, and you're not making reference to them in terms of working with them or having consulted them, we will probably raise that flag to you.
Yeah, so
it doesn't mean it will not be eligible then, but we would then work with you to make sure it's
being... Yeah, okay. I didn't mean to, obviously there are some partners that would be essential if you're working in areas that need approval and require you to work with somebody else. But there are some calls for proposals actively, you know, they request that you establish partnerships to be eligible for the project. And that doesn't seem to be the case here. That's really what I'm trying to clarify.
No, I think, I mean, we've done that before, we've asked that before, but then you get a sort of a forced collaboration because the donor asks it, but in real life, it doesn't work.
Yes.
So we would encourage, you know, honest synergy options to be exploited to the full.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say we will probably also encourage synergies as the portfolio of projects develop. When we will start having several grantees working on the same theme or around the same area, we will probably encourage that, and that would then be, you know, maybe some amendments or just you know, additional meetings.
Okay, so opportunities later on. Thank you.
I see one practical question in the chat, and then I'll go to Bernardo. So the question I saw in the chat is about exchange rates, which one to use. I think you shouldn't worry about that at this point in time, because this is just the letter of interest. So your project idea, and later on, if you move on to a second stage, then it will be clarified which exchange rate you will have to put in your budget. But for now, I wouldn't worry about that. Now what we want to put all your energy in a good idea that will work. Bernardo, please.
Good question, and I'm not sure if it makes sense or not, but I guess it does. Hopefully it does. So if we make a grant, we get a grant, small grant now, and then there is more calls in the future. We can have grants that keep supporting the same project. I mean, we can keep adding up to the projects, new grants and new initiatives that will just go more or less on the beginning or initial project. I'm not sure if I could explain myself.
In principle, yes. If your follow-up ideas are still fantastic and they will add value to the objective, then for sure you will be in competition with others, of course. But no, there's no reason why a good idea should be refused because you've already had a first phase.
Good, it makes sense. Thank you very much.
I see no more hands up unless I'm missing something.
I'm seeing in the chat from Xavier, could the project be as simple as funding the recruitment of a critical resource we are missing, such as botanist, ecologue, in order to establish a long-term strategy and start work for maximum impact? So that, Xavier, sounds, if that's just that project, that will then probably be under strategic direction number 3, which is about building capacities of your organization. However, having just that as a project without, you know, what you call the maximum impact or the strategy itself, that may be falling a little bit short, but that's, in theory, it's something that can be funded as part of the project. It will be, you know, an element of your project, because we are paying for human resources, so you can definitely recruit some people to implement the projects that you're suggesting.
Thank you. If I can just ask, yes, I was asking this because in some of the material that you've shared, it says that projects should be very straightforward as far as possible. So I'm taking the opportunity to ask maximum questions. Sure. And so, yes, if we have a project that is ongoing or that is already more or less in place and all that, but we are missing this resource, then this can be, the project doesn't have to be just that, but it can be a strong reinforcement of a project, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, as long as the logic is that it's more than funding a salary of a person, and that the totality is going to make a difference in terms of ecosystem-based adaptation and or development.
Exactly.
Sure, definitely. Thank you very much.
And that actually leads me to another point we may not have necessarily dig into, but CEPF does not require co-funding. You can apply to CEPF to fund entirely a project. So we do not require you to find other donors. And however, if you already have a project ongoing, or if you want to apply to another project, to another donor, and you need co-funding for that other project, we can be used as co-funding, yes.
Okay, Bernardo, I see you have
seed money, actually.
Sorry, Peggy. Bernardo, I see you have another question.
Yeah, and hopefully it's my last question. I just want to understand better this human resources eligibility, because, and maybe I read it wrong. When I read the document, I had the impression there was some restrictions on this, and now I realized that, for instance, the botanist ecologue that Xavier just put the question. So a researcher would be eligible to be put as a cost. An educator, would it be eligible to put it as a cost? So these human resources costs can be included or not?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We are
if it's part of the project.
Yeah, we're funding everything you need for the project.
Okay, I don't know why I had this impression.
Well, it's the one thing, maybe, I don't know whether it's mentioned somewhere, but the one thing basically that we won't fund is, for example, an individual PhD as such.
Okay, so if it is a study for a PhD, no, but if
it's got to be embedded in sort of a bigger project, which makes sense from a conservation / ecosystem-based adaptation perspective.
Exactly.
Okay, but it could be, and I didn't thought about this before, but it could be that when you are doing a PhD, so you don't fund the PhD, but you can find, let's say, part of the research of the PhD if it brings the benefits that also
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we are also funding the administrative cost, like this slide is showing. So usually CEPF is pretty good at trying to fund everything and not asking for co-funding. So this is a good entry point for organizations who usually, I mean, those organizations usually cannot get funds for those human resources and those administrative costs. So we fund the rent of your organization, of your office. We can fund your financial person, your director. We can fund all of that as long as they all contribute, of course, towards the project.
So maybe moving towards the conclusions, and unless there are some pertinent questions. So I think what is clear, or what should be clear to you, this is the first call of proposals, which has very specific details on what is eligible and what is not eligible. Next year, we'll have another call, or probably 2 more calls for proposals, which may have different thematic priorities or geographic priorities. So keep watching our website. More opportunities will come up over the next couple of years, but this is the first one. And based on what we get on the first one, of course, we may also have to rethink in terms of priority for the next call, etc. Eva, do you want to add anything? Did we miss anything?
You get a new question in the chat.
Yes,
How
on the
many?
chat.
Oh, sorry. How many calls are planning for the whole investment?
We don't have a clear answer for you just yet, because we adapt the number of calls based on how the portfolio of projects will develop. But usually, and again, I'm talking in terms of usual, although this investment is unusual, we have about 2 calls for proposal per year. We have sometimes more, because we then do very, very targeted calls. Like, we're going to say only those, just an example, those 3 KBAs will be eligible for this call, and only that specific investment priority will be eligible for this call. So when it's super targeted, we are able to do more calls. Then when we do more broad call, like this one is relatively broad in terms of geographies, and yet targeted in terms of on thematic. But yeah, you can expect for sure 1 more call next year in early, yeah, maybe March, somewhere there. And then there will be another one, at least more towards the second half of 2023.
But meanwhile, also keep your eyes open to other similar calls for proposal from other entities, like the Jeff Small Grants, like the Varuna program, like Mitsubishi Foundations. Try to be smart and think of synergy. Oh, this bit can be funded through the CEPF budget lines, and that bit could probably be funded through the Jeff Small Grants head. Try to be smart in how we can combine maximum donor opportunities.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing before we leave everybody. If you look at the chapter 14 of the ecosystem profile, you will see all the strategic directions, so all the thematic that we will be covering between now and 2027. So if right now you, for example, we mentioned the research projects, it's going to be part of a subsequent call, specifically research project will be. So you can check that chapter and see what's going to be eligible at some stage, and more soon than later, they will be eligible.
Okay, then I come back to Eva again. Anything from your end, Eva, before we close off?
I think that we have gone through all of everything, Mark.
Okay, so please, for any remaining questions that might pop up tomorrow, the day after, next week, put them into the general email address that has been provided, so we can try to find you an answer.
Yes, and don't forget, we will post regularly the questions and the answers we are getting throughout this process. We will post them on the last link of this slide, the website, so that we can be transparent, and we can, you know, if you have questions, you can refer there, see if it has not yet been answered, and if not, then you can still reach out to us. But good luck, everybody, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much for attending this call.
Thank you very much, all of you. Have a good day, the rest of the day, good weekend, and hope to meet you again sometime, somehow. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.